No, no buzz. A Just Bees book club. Buckle up, motherfuckers. Uh, Today I have read The Animorphs, number 54. The beginning. Subtitle. It began with 6, it will end with 5. This is the final book in the Animorphs series. The Animorphs were a young, middle grade book series running from like the mid 90s to 2001. This one came out in 2001, a couple months before September 11th. Deeply controversial ending to this series. We'll get into that more later. I decided to read it because about 20 years ago, I was a kid who, maybe a little bit more than that at this point, was in grade school. The Animorphs were big. Harry Potter wasn't quite out yet, so J.K. Rowling hadn't eaten everybody's lunch. And the Scholastic Book Fair would come through my rinky ass little school, and the Animorphs were on there, and there were these weird covers with people turning into animals, and I got a couple of them. I probably read the first dozen, maybe, before I fell off of the series, um, and didn't think about them for a little while. I know there was the like Nickelodeon live adaptation at some point. I think I might have seen that. I think I might not have also. Who can tell? I remember the Goosebumps adaptation, but not anything specific about the Animorphs one. Didn't think about them for a long time. Then there was like two things about K.A. Applegate sort of floated around the social media that I was part of at different times. One was that her daughter came out as trans, and she was deeply supportive, in contradistinction to another very famous young adult fiction writer. And the other was a letter that she wrote to fans after the conclusion, like a couple of years after, I believe is the thing. I've tried to look into this, and it seems to be kind of hard to find out exactly when that was written, or at least I couldn't track it down exactly. That, like I said before, is the thing we'll get into a little bit later. But first, I would like to talk about the Animorphs, the beginning, book number 54. Um, Partially in relation to my own experience, right? Like I said, I hadn't read one of these in about 20 years. I had heard the things around social media, and then about a year ago, the place I work at got an advanced reader copy of the Animorphs graphic novel, the second one. I believe that's The Stranger. I'm not positive exactly, though. Um, and I was like, they're doing an Animorphs graphic novel. That's cool. And I was like, I wonder how hard they're going. Because, like, in my memory, it's been 20 years, but in my memory, the descriptions of the morphs in Animorphs were kind of fucked. Like, they were kind of like really unsettling. And I wonder if they're like gonna just like tone that down for the graphic novel stuff. And I was really excited when I like sort of flipped through the second graphic novel and was like, no, this is gross. Like this is gross. Like they are showing the like quarter morphs or 5/8 morphs like between a human and a rat, and it's like a rat with human shit still stuck to it and like kind of like ewy. um it was an advanced reader copy, so I don't even get like the full color edition, but I'm sure that would just add to it, or maybe subtract from it, who knows. But I got that, and I flipped through it, and I was like, well, I have like a 7-year old friend who's reading pretty well, and I know, one of the parents really loves body horror, so I'm gonna give it to the parent and see if it's. And it seems like it went over really well. So that's cool. It was cool to like have a moment of being like, oh yeah, this thing I liked like is being turned into this new format, and it seems accessible to younger readers who are as interested in weird shit as I was at the time. Um, but that was like a year ago, and that's yeah, it was over a year ago, or no, right around a year ago, because I think those graphic novels are coming out every October, and so the advanced reader copy would have been right around now, actually August-ish. I wonder if I'm gonna get another one of those soon. That would be interesting. Um, did that, sort of stopped thinking about it, as it goes. And then a couple weeks ago, I saw this copy as on a cart as a donation book, and I was like, huh. If ever there was a time to just simply read the final Animorphs book. Why wouldn't it be now? Why would I go back and, um, you know, reread the entire series? I know they have been released for free on the internet. I think they're completely out of print, so it's like not a great way to like collect them. I mean, there's probably a great way to collect them, which is like go on eBay or Abe Books or Libris and just buy them all for, you know, $12 or something like that. Um, but they're available for free, and I know I think I've also, in the context of seeing those other things, seen that there are like whole podcasts about rereading all the books and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just like not very that interested in that. The thing I was interested in is just if I just read the last one, basically context free. I don't need to go back and remember these characters or how these books are structured. Like let's just dive in, see where it takes us. The answer is it's pretty fucking good. It's pretty fucking good. I think this book specifically, with only the context of the letter that I will be reading later, I think you could read this by itself and kind of get the whole thing. Um, and you wouldn't be as mad as a bunch of teens were a million years ago. Maybe I don't know. Maybe you will be. Who knows? I don't know you because you're. Wait a second. Are you a bee? Okay. Well, so the basic premise of this, it opens with the line, My name is Rachel. I knew it was coming, and I knew I'd seen it in Jake's eyes, and you know what? I was scared. She was scared because she's about to die. One of the main characters, who has survived 53 books, dies in the first 15 pages of this book. You can imagine how devastating that would be to a child or a young adult reading these, or an adult reading these whose primary investment in them is with identifying with a character rather than the broader thematic ideas at play. And this is a middle grade novel. This is a middle grade novel series. Yeah, there are broader thematic ideas at play. That's true of all um, things made by people, but especially arts, or most especially usefully in relation to thinking through how art works. And I say art very broadly, as in things made by people in order to be. Am I really gonna try this? Am I really gonna try to extemporaneously define art? I think I might not actually. Um, I think I might walk that back. Um, but especially in things you are interested in interpreting, uh, thematic understandings of things I find to be very useful. Um, so yeah, Rachel dies. My first surprise here in reading this, because I kind of already knew that would happen. I mean, it says it began with 6, it will end with 5. Uh, my name is Rachel. I knew it was about to happen. Is a very clear. She's gonna die. Um, the thing I had kind of forgotten about structurally with the Animorphs is that each chapter is told from a different one of the main characters' perspectives. I had forgotten that it jumps perspectives literally chapter to chapter. Um, the she doesn't die in the first chapter, but yeah, okay. So I think it's actually Rachel for the first 2, 3. Okay, and by that I'm still on page 18 right now. So okay, we can fact check me. She dies in 21 pages. This book, not 15. And then we get chapter 4, and this is where she's dead and meets the Ellimist, who I guess is the god of that series. I don't think I got to that point. Um, but then you get chapter 5. So page 25, chapter 5. It says Jake right under there. So we switch over to Jake. And then, we got chapter 6. Right there. Cassie. It's got Cassie right under there. Every chapter just flops between different characters. I was a structural component of these books that somehow over the course of 2 decades or more I had forgotten. I had forgotten that was the way these things were structured, and it really like I was like, that's really cool. I'm really glad I read this as a younger kid. Like I'm glad that I was exposed to it's not experimental in any way. I mean, that's the I mean, perspective shifting inside of a book has been done since what? Uh, in a tale of some sort. It's old as time. Um, I couldn't pin down a novel, but you're definitely talking early modernism, probably. Uh, would be my guess. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a historian. Um, that's a it's a technique that I feel goes in and out of fashion. That or rather, probably more accurately, um, falls in and out of favor with the critical apparatus that sort of ends up deciding the canon. I suspect there are novels from the uh, late 18th, early 19th century that did formal tricks that we would not recognize because they sort of fell by the wayside, or that were not published in a broad way or preserved, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, generally speaking, shifting perspectives is like a really it's still a it's still a smaller subsection of fiction than the regular sort of trifecta of, or the two main ways that we think of POV, right? Um, Omniscient third person. I guess I guess it's right to say three. Omniscient third, close third, or first person point of view are usually what we're talking about when we're talking about fiction. We're not usually assuming a book is going to be multiple first person perspectives like this one, or like I've talked about before on this channel, like first person plural, like with Julia Tsuka, or second person is sort of still demonized in a weird way. I think people are like generally opposed to second person in that they only talk about it when they're like, "Wow, this is really good because it actually does second person well." But I think the not plural but multiple first person POV is like not non-existent, but it is a much smaller, um, much less common way to approach published fiction, and I appreciate that this book does that. We are not stuck to the young boy or whatever. We're not stuck to one character. We get interior lives of these different characters, and just from reading this one, maybe this probably develops over time, but like the characters don't have like these markedly distinct voices. They don't have like reading through it. I wasn't like I think you could probably pick out who was saying each one without the chapter header, but it might not be super clear. They're kind of all sort of told in a very similar style. An approachable middle grade sort of style. Even though I think this is before middle grade was really a thing, which I think is to its benefit, really. Um, but like one small thing just immediately coming into this where I was like, oh yeah, and it wasn't just like, oh yeah, that's how these are told. It was like, oh yeah, that's how these are told, and that was useful, I think, to me in branching out into more experimental literature. I wouldn't call House of Leaves experimental, but like by the time I was in like late high school and finding House of Leaves, that would lead me on to like genuinely more experimental literature. Uh, I would I would I would call this like a premeditator of this in some way. It was like I had already internalized the multiple first possibility as a thing because of Animorphs and presumably some other stuff that I've forgotten. But um, I don't know. It was cool to see that, and it was cool to see that this was like a space that middle grade literature was playing in the mid '90s and the early 2000s. Um, the next main thing, I don't have to go on forever on this one. They say 15 minutes in to a book that takes an hour and a half to read, maybe maximum if you're at my speed at least. It is sweltering in this room. um, excuse me. So the first half or so of the book, maybe a little more than half, is really cool. Um, because when Rachel dies, they win the war, right? They win the alien war, the larger plot of Animorphs. If you're this far in and do not know what Animorphs is, I respect that. That's how I approach most media criticism these days. Um, there's this alien race called the Andalites. They are these big centaur boys with scorpion tails, no mouths. They're all blue. One of them crash lands on Earth when these four heroes, Jake, Cassie, Marco, and uh, Rachel, are like 13 years old and coming back from school. They they accidentally run into this crash in like a construction yard or something like that, I think. And they see that there's like a bunch of aliens there. The Andalite has like some sort of telepathic communication with them, um, gives them the ability to morph into any animal whose DNA they have absorbed, and they just have to touch the animal for a period of time to absorb the DNA. And then is murdered by the pursuing aliens who crash landed the ship in the first place. The pursuing aliens are these things called the Yeerks. The Yeerks are brain parasites. They are little slugs who crawl into your ear or whatever, I guess, depending on the alien species they're absorbing. But in the early books specifically, it was very much an ear canal thing. Crawl in there, like, wrap themselves around your brain and take control of you. There's some semblance of you still in there, but everything you do, say, think, everything you enact is controlled. That's why they're called the controllers. They're being controlled by the Yeerks. Yeerks is Yeerks. Andalites is Andalites. There ends up being another Andalite who comes down named Aximilian, and then two other names. They call him Axe the whole time. That's the six at the subtitle of this one. Um, so the six of them. Oh, I didn't mention Tobias either. Sorry. I was like a huge Tobias fan when I was 12 or whatever. So that was like pretty, pretty unforgivable of me just now. Um, they fight this battle. They find out that they find a bunch of different animals they can morph into. They foil plots by the Yeerks to take over, different parts of society. They discover that people they know and love have always been controlled by the Yeerks for years. They, et cetera, et cetera. Hijinks, some Monster of the Week shit, some ongoing stuff. Love triangles form and dissolve, and I don't actually know if that's true, but there's like little romances at least here and there, and friendships definitely form and dissolve and reform and et cetera, et cetera. Um, the kind of things that would happen in a 54 book series. Um, but throughout that whole thing, they're fighting they are up until presumably the last like 2 or 3 books. They are the only 6 people on the planet who aren't controlled by the Yeerks who know anything about them. So they're single-handedly fighting um, a guerrilla war against an invading force. Um, and and I think that's the major through line. I think is made incredibly clear in this book, because, like I said, first 5 chapters, um, the Rachel's last stand where she dies. Um, when she dies, she kills off sort of the main, like, or the secondary general of the Yeerks, or the primary. I don't remember how war works. I don't remember how armies are structured. But basically, there's the head person who Jake and the rest of the crew have um, already captured, and then there's the next in command who is the person that Rachel kills right before she dies. Um, who's also her cousin and Jake's brother, as I just remembered from rereading the beginning of this before I started talking. I am sweating bullets right now because it's hot, not because of the content I'm talking about. Point being, first 5 chapters of this book, they win the war. The whole thing, the whole through line of this series, everything they've been thwarted by, everything that has brought them together, finally comes to an end. They capture the leader of the Yeerks. They I also think there's like something in here somewhere where it's like, oh, this is sort of the Yeerks' last stand. Like they have been pushed out of most other places because they're like a fully parasitic people whose like existence requires them to non-consensually enslave other sentient creatures. I guess there's maybe I assume at some point they talk about whether or not Yeerks can take over non-sapient creatures. I don't really know. That's an interesting thing that I will never know the answer to. Ever. So it's like the end of the war. Like they win. These like six kids win this galactic war. And so the first half and a little more than half of the beginning here that we're talking about is just sort of shifting perspectives as they sort of fall apart as a unit, as uh, Tobias just disappears because Tobias and Rachel were in love. Tobias just is like, I'm out. We get no explanation. We get none. I think we get like, I don't even know if we get a single chapter from Tobias's perspective here. I think we get one near the end, and I think that's it. So Tobias is like, also Tobias, importantly, I guess, in like the second book, maybe even the first, finds out that if you stay in an animal morph for more than 2 hours, you are that animal forever. Um, that's like one of the drawbacks of being able to morph. It's tension throughout. But I think it's important to say that, like, again, in one of the first couple books of this series, um, they don't just say like, oh, if you're gonna be an animal, if you're gonna do an animal morph for a couple hours, you're gonna if it's like 2 hours and 5 minutes, you're gonna be an animal forever, and then they just hang it over your head. It's if you hang out in this form for more than 2 hours, you're gonna be that animal forever. You can't morph into anything anymore, and that happens immediately in the series. Um, very good, very good GMing, to use a tabletop term. If you do the thing and the rule is established, the thing has been done. Um, and it gives stakes, right? It's the whole rest of the series when somebody's like, oh god, I'm like an hour and a half in. Oh god, I'm a flea and I don't have like eyesight. I don't know. I'm not sure I can get to a place where I can demorph. Um, there is at least in the back of your mind the sense that like, well, she did it once. She did it once. Instead of like, oh right, that empty threat that came up like 30 books ago. Like who cares? But yes, Tobias, hot boy forever, gone, just gone. Uh, Marco, the sort of like playboy, goofy guy, uh, actually gets written really well here. I think, which is like he actually kind of thrives afterwards, in a way that I think is written like pretty well across the beginning. This book, it, he's not just thriving; he is partially thriving because um, he was always the first to crack a joke or whatever. That's not me remembering that. That's me having reestablished that through this book, because it does do a good job of the the thing that you learn from Nancy Drew or whatever, right? Like you got to hit the beats. You got to hit the beats. You got to say Nancy Drew, a Titian-haired blonde. Like this could be anyone's first one. This is my first one in a very long time. Marco, good jokester, good-hearted, um, genuinely will do hard things, but like doesn't want to, and also doesn't take them to heart in a certain way. He thrives. He's at one point in the book he's described as having like 9 million blah 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 in his Merrill Lynch bank account. Mostly in stocks and bonds, or mostly in bonds, but some in stocks or something like that. There's a lot of very specific references to like Greta Van Susteren and Merrill Lynch and like stuff I don't even remember off the top of my head, but I just remember being like, yeah, this was written in the year 2000. Um, Marco's like doing okay, But you sort of find out he like feels a little unfulfilled in his life. Which isn't very like lifestyles of the rich and famous, like good Charlotte ass shit or whatever. But like, it's not bad. It's like a pretty solid way of saying like some people are uh some people go through some shit and they kind of stay themselves even though they have also changed. Rachel obviously is dead. And Jake is like the big one, right? Because Jake is sort of the blonde boy, the leader of the group, the general of the Animorphs. Um, and he finishes the war and goes, "What? What do I do? I've been leading a 6-person guerrilla war for uh, from when I was 13 years old till I'm now like 16 or 17. There's a couple. There's a 1 year gap and a 2 year gap in here, so I guess technically there's like 13 to 16, and then up until he's 18 for the rest of the book. But like, it's like, I mean, it's pretty clear I think in today's terms that Jake has like pretty severe PTSD from like making decisions that like say for instance gets his cousin killed, that just like repeatedly cause him to be in like this massive stress, where he has to make snap decisions that like even when they don't get his friends killed could. And he just is written pretty well in a very middle grade sort of way, as like somebody who's just like, I just never want to make a decision for myself or anyone else ever again. I don't want to be responsible for anything ever again. That's like the first. Oh, and then there's Cassie, who like sort of falls deep into like there's a deep liberalism to this. Who sort of falls into like the nonprofit sort of category. She ends up sort of tending to one of the alien species that they repatriate to this planet because like it's like the Hork-Bajir are like, I don't even remember what they are described as, but they're a large race of like centaurs or minotaurs, maybe kind of animals, that were like entirely taken over by the Yeerks, and then they no longer have their controllers. They don't, but they also don't have a habitat, so they end up resettled in Yellowstone, of all things. And like Cassie ends up sort of becoming a person who's like in government positions, is like this lauded hero of the world, but like sort of goes behind the scenes to like try to help environment help the environment be made more stable with this introduction of a whole new species and shit like that. And so yeah, again, the first half of this book is just sort of dealing with that, dealing with the ways in which they do or do not interact with each other. There's like a year time skip where they're like Cassie and Jake were kind of a thing, and then they're not anymore, and now who like knows what's going on, but and like Marco's kind of like trying to like bridge the gap, but neither of them are kind of, I mean, Cassie's busy with her work, Jake is busy with his post-traumatic stress, um, and Axe I think is off doing Andalite shit. There's like whole sections of this book that are dedicated to like the new Andalite tourist trade, where like a bunch of Andalites come down and they turn into humans, and because Andalites don't have mouths, they've never had a sense of smell or taste before, and they're just like, oh fuck me, Krispy Kreme, dude. um and that was like a joke that had been made I think earlier in the series based on just like how it was written in this one, but like the image of like tourists just being like, I've never tasted anything before. Now I can taste the the most uh, the most stoned food you could imagine. Um, and yeah, that half of the book I found incredibly compelling. Even having not read each prior book to like devour the whole theme, it just worked really well for me. I think it displayed the characters like solidly. There's fumbles here and there, but like they're, like I said, this is like you can read this in less time than it would take to watch a Marvel film if you just kind of blow through it and you have practice reading and read at a at a rate close to me, is I guess what I can say, which I know is faster than a lot of people because I just kind of go, I just kind of read a lot. Um, there's a weird turn about halfway through that I'm not super fond of. Where oh wait, no, hold on, wait, I'm wrong. This is longer than I think it is. 150. Where's the halfway point of 150? uh okay, yes, no, okay, so it's like the first third is what I just described, or the first. I'm cutting this up in a way that the book isn't actually cut up. First act is that. Second act is a year later when they all go to The Hague to try the leader of the Yerks, and it is a weird ass thing that I don't even feel like I need to get into, other than to say like a bunch of fucking 17-year-olds go to The Hague and are like trying to rekindle their lost friendships while also testifying against an alien who tried to mind control the whole Earth. And they are going to do it through the rule of law. God damn it! um, uh, and the ending is that the Visser, the leader of the Yerks, is sentenced to life in prison. Very humane. Um, Again, so there's a good deal of liberalism throughout this. The back third, the final act, I guess. Again, it was not. This is not in thirds. The final act is a little weird. This is where we get our first shots of Axe, who is doing like a routine patrol, but he's like a little proud of himself because most of the warrior Andalites have been decommissioned now that the Yeerk War is over. I think this is like 2 years later, and then he like encounters something. It's like a big ship that looks all weird, like a bunch of skyscrapers bolted together that has also been hit by a weird beam, but there's no signs of life on it. But there is some DNA, like human DNA. And he's like, well, I better go investigate. And then it turns out it's a trap, and there's like these weird political machinations also at the end of this. We cut away from Axe, and then we go back to, I think there's probably like a Marco chapter or something like that, and then a Jake chapter where they run into Jake, who's now like teaching morphing tactics to military people, which sorry, I meant to do this. That was the gesture I meant to do. The double birds. Um, uh, Jake like runs into some Andalites who are like, hey yo, or they like call him aside and we're like, hey yo, Axe got disappeared. I was on his ship and we got to this ship and et cetera, like what I just said. And then Jake sort of gets the team back together, although in a very weird way where he like um it has been established that him and Tobias have not and will never speak again. Um, Mostly by Tobias's wishes, because Tobias kind of low-key blames Jake for getting Rachel killed. And Jake, and as I said, whatever, half an hour ago, probably only 15 minutes ago, Tobias and Rachel were in love, despite the fact that Tobias is permanently formed into a hawk. Apparently, at some point during these books, Tobias gets the like capacity to briefly turn into a human again for short periods of time, which sort of undermines the whole thing I said earlier about like there being consequences. But I assume by the time that happened, it had been 20 or 30 books where no one else had become a permanent, um, had never had become permanently anamorphed. So it's like kind of fair game, I guess, at that point. Um, Spy is very mad at Jake for getting his girlfriend killed. Uh, Jake goes to Cassie first, which is interesting because of the way this plays out. He goes to Cassie and like hanging out in Yellowstone with her new boyfriend and like watching these Hork-Bajir, and they meet up and Jake's like, "Ayo, Axe got captured," and Cassie's like, "God damn it, Jake, are we really okay? We're doing this again?" And Jake's like, "Nah, you're good. You found your purpose in life. This is the thing you have always wanted to do. You're very important to do it here, and you should do it here." And Kathy's like, okay, I guess this is my chance to say goodbye. And she says goodbye, and it's just like, cool. I don't want to fight a fucking war again. Um, Jake goes to Marco, who in that maybe the weirdest, most specific scene in my brain is uh, going to the bottom of the pool that he has in the back of his, you know, $1 million house, and just morphing into a lobster, just because he has a memory of like a thing that I assume happened in another book, but like the lobster morph, and this is what I was saying with the graphic novels, is described as like it was like your it was like your fingernails started covering your whole body or something like that. I'm not gonna pull up the exact text because I didn't like mark it in any way. This isn't this isn't fucking the portrait of the artist as a young man, all right? Even though this is gonna be almost as long, and I really like this book. Okay. I got a little heated there, and not in the sense that I'm still dripping sweat. Because that lobster description is fucking weird. Maybe it's a specific thing for me. Do not like fingernail stuff. Don't like fingernail stuff. Don't like fingernail stuff in horror. Don't like fingernail stuff in real life. Just not a big fingernail stuff kind of person. So just kind of casually reading a description of your fingernails, kind of just and then like has that care. Obviously, it's a thing about a carapace. Like it's a pretty well, I think, a pretty good piece of writing in that way. But then like it's like it all hardens, and then like one of your like limbs kind of form together, and one of them like bursts out much bigger than the other. And it was like fucking gross. And it was for this completely incidental moment where like the only point of it is that like Jake shows up and goes like, "Hey, why are you turning into a lobster?" And Marco's like, "I lost my keys in a pool." And Jake's like, "Oh, yeah, I definitely had to turn into a lobster for that." This fucking little shitty little bit of repartee that is just immediately preceded by one of the most gross images I have ever read. Which is another reason I quite like this book. Um, Jake recruits Marco. They go find Tobias. Tobias comes along. They recruit some fucking FBI agents or whatever the fuck. And long story short, they. No, actually, wait a second. I didn't mark this because it's just the end. But it's another good little bit. They head out into space. There's a whole weird small subplot that I think is actually really important on reflection. Um, there's like a whole nother alien species that hasn't even been brought up throughout um, these books, because the Andalites like control a significant portion of outer space, but there's like a whole other portion of space that's controlled by these other aliens. Again, I'm not going to find it off the top. Um, and they just basically have a mutual non-aggression pact sort of thing going on, where they're like, you don't come into our space, we don't come into your space, we're good. Second one of us crosses that, all out war. Simple as that. And I think Jake asked at some point, like, so what do they look like? What's their deal? And they're like, we don't know. We've never been into their space, and they've never been into ours. Like we just do not know. And it's the treaty's been around for a long time, and it's worked so far. But it turns out this like final Yerk ship now has an Andalite and is in this alien space. So they could very, very possibly just dump an Andalite off and cause an intergalactic war. A hundred times more magnitude than this one that you just finished. Um, which is it's interesting for reasons we will get to. And then the end of this book is they find the Blade ship where the last of the Yeerks are, and where presumably Axe has been. They also find out that Axe was taken by the Blade ship. So not presumably, like they know this. They're out in space for long periods of time. They try to do the like space is big thing, but like this book is this big. It's and the type is this big. You can't really do that. They're having like a parlay with the Yerk captain on the ship that has trapped Axe. Uh, and their gambit is like that one of the FBI people is pretending to be a Yerk controller or a human controller, that is like searching out this final ship. The the Empire is gone. We all know this. Um, you will place yourself under the command of the One. That's the Yerk captain speaking. Santarelli is the human. Santarelli's eyebrow shot up. The who? He blurted. I looked at Jake, at Tobias, at Jean. There was a sort of collective shrug. This is from Marco's perspective. I command this ship, Efflet 1318 explained, or Efflet 1318 explained, but I serve at the pleasure of the one who is many, the one who is all. We are not alone, Wreckage 4691. We are not this ship alone. We are the seeds of a new empire that will far outshine the old under the leadership of the one. Weird and wild. Weird to see that wild, messianic glow in the eyes of a man you knew was really just a Yerk slave. It was a disturbingly human expression. Santarelli said, who is this one? I will invoke his presence, the Yerk said. He closed his eyes and raised his face. Okay, this is unexpected, I whispered. There was a long silent pause during which time the two ships drew closer and closer, too close now to do anything but play the game through. If this was a ruse, it was a convincing one. If it was a ruse, we were dead. I glanced at Jake and wished my heart wasn't jackhammering away. Suddenly, the screen image went blank. The human controller was gone. What the? Tobias demanded. But then the screen glowed to life. More than the screen, the whole front of the bridge was glowing, a light so bright it seemed to shine right through the bulkheads. Within the searing light, an image appeared. It was an alien, not Yerk. That was to be expected from the Yerks. They were, after all, parasites, so you never saw the Yerks themselves. Oh my god, I just thought I saw thought I saw that I had never started this recording. Glad I did. Um, but there was something very wrong with this particular alien. The face that filled the screen and more was a shifting image, a slow dissolve from what might be a robot's face, a machine with a rat-trap mouth and steel eyes, into a sweet, feminine, almost elfin visage, and last and most enduring, into the face of Aximili Esgaroth Istil. Axe? Tobias whispered. The face that belonged to our friend Axe split wide open across the bottom and revealed a new formed mouth full of red-rimmed teeth. Save your tricks for this Yerk fool, the one said. I see the truth. I see all. Step into view, Jake the Yerk killer. I know you are there. I feel your mind. It's a fucking fun image. I don't know. And then it, like, literally, the end of this book is it's Jake going, like, stepping out and being like, huh, okay, so they got us outgunned. Yeah, definitely, okay. That's definitely not axing more. Marco, you said I should make like reckless decisions, and Marco's like, oh fuck, and then Jake says, oh, ram him, and it just cuts there. The book just ends with Jake being like, we're back at war, and now I'm confident again. Which is horrifying. It's horrifying. I've been threatening to read this thing for a while now. Yeah, damn, this is gonna be as long as the fucking James Joyce episode. Okay, so I had seen this thing floating around, float around Twitter a couple times. I feel like, and it's one of the reasons that I wanted to read specifically the end of the series. And I think it's a thing that some people have heard of. If you're a B, you've probably heard of it because I have. But I tried to trace it down. I couldn't get a really good beat on where it exactly initially came from. So the closest I could get was here Hirac Delest, Hiracdelest, subtitle in Animorphs Archive. That's the website. The title of this thing is K.A. Applegate's Response to Criticism of Final Animorphs Book. Parenthetically, number 54, the beginning. I'm going to be looking over this way a little bit because I can't look into the camera and read at the same time. I apologize. My setup's a little weird. The sort of subhead, this response was posted on morphs.com, morphz.com, by the co-owner Jeff Sampson, who had kept in touch with K.A. Applegate during the run of the Animorph series. And then we got a sort of prefatory text. Hi everyone. I remember when the last Animorphs book first came out, how there were some people who really hated it. Their negative posts really brought me down because I loved the last book, and I was compelled to respond to all of the posts. Apparently, K.A. felt the same way. So here it is for you, a letter from her to the fans explaining exactly why she ended it the way she did. A response that will undoubtedly annoy some people. Be warned, the following does contain spoilers. Don't read it if you haven't read the last book. Signed, Jeff Sampson. And now we're going to get into that aforementioned letter. I'm going to take a sip. Dear Animorphs readers, quite a number of people seem to be annoyed by the fact. I tried to scroll and I did it wrong. Dear Animorphs readers, quite a number of people seem to be annoyed by the final chapter in the Animorphs story. There are a lot of complaints that I let Rachel die, that I let Visser 3/1 live, that's the one who is prisoned forever, that Cassie and Jake broke up, that Tobias seems to have been reduced to unexpressed grief. There was no grand final fight to end all fights. There was no happy celebration. And everyone is mad about the cliffhanger ending. So I thought I'd respond. Animorphs was always a war story. Wars don't end happily. Not ever. Often relationships that were central during war dissolve during peace. Some people who were brave and fearless in war are unable to handle peace, feel disconnected and confused. Other times people in war make the move to peace very easily. Always people die in wars. And always people are left shattered by the loss of loved ones. That's what happens, so that's what I wrote. Jake and Cassie were in love during the war, and ended up going their separate ways afterwards. Jake, who was so brave and capable during the war, is adrift during the peace. Marco and Axe, on the other hand, move easily past the war, and even manage to use their experience to good effect. Rachel dies, and Tobias will never get over it. That doesn't by any means cover everything that happens in a war, but it's a start. I'm going to cut in here very quickly for a second to say that one of the things that I think is done especially well in the book that is not actually mentioned in this letter is that one of the biggest things that Jake is fucked up about is that he kills a bunch of defenseless Yeerks during the war. He war crimes some Yeerks, and he's fucked up about it. But anyway, I'm going to get back to this. So just to go to that last sentence over again. That doesn't by any means cover everything that happens in a war, but it's a start. Here's what doesn't happen in war. There are no wondrous climactic battles that leave the good guys standing tall and the bad guys lying in the dirt. Life isn't a World Wrestling Federation smackdown. Even the people who win a war, who survive and come out the other side with the conviction that they have done something brave and necessary, don't do a lot of celebrating. There's very little chanting of "We're number one" among people who have personally experienced war. I'm just a writer, and my main goal was always to entertain. But I've never let Animorphs turn into just another painless video game version of war, and I wasn't going to do it at the end. I've spent 60 books telling a strange, fanciful war story, sometimes very seriously, sometimes more tongue-in-cheek. I've written a lot of action and a lot of humor and a lot of sheer nonsense. But I have also, again and again, challenged readers to think about what they were reading. To think about the right and wrong, not just the who beat who. And to tell you the truth, I'm a little shocked that so many readers seem to believe I'd wrap it all up with a lot of high-fiving and backslapping. Wars very often end, sad to say, just as ours did, with a nearly seamless transition to another war. And again, I'd mentioned this before, but I don't really know exactly the the date of this letter, but like given that this book was written in 2001 or published in like May of 2001, and this is presumably within the next couple of years, like this is almost certainly a specific reaction to the Afghanistan war being transferred into the Iraq war. Um, so just to get back into the flow, again to read that last sentence one more time. Wars very often end, sad to say, just as ours did, with a nearly seamless transition to another war. So you don't like the way our little fictional war came out. You don't like Rachel dead and Tobias shattered and Jake guilt-ridden. You don't like that one war simply led to another? Fine. Pretty soon you'll all be of voting age and of draft age. So when someone proposes a war, remember that even the most necessary wars, even the wars where the lines of good and evil are clear and clean, end with a lot of people dead, a lot of people disabled, and a lot of orphans, widows, and grieving parents. I substituted a word there. Um, if you're mad at me because that's what you have, sorry, if you're mad at me because that's what you have to take away from Animorphs, too bad. I couldn't have written it any other way and remained true to the respect I have always felt for Animorphs readers. K.A. Applegate. Um, so, there's a lot of stuff in there, and I don't want to unpack it all because I think a lot of it I have sort of already set up, and I think a lot of it is fairly self-explanatory. And I include the mention of liberalism as part of a setup here. Um, but I wanted to just make as clear as possible because I don't know if I made it explicit um, that, and I don't know that she makes it explicit in this letter either, is I guess the other part of it. Uh, the last sentence of the first paragraph, and everyone is mad about the cliffhanger ending. I have done a little digging into this, and I've seen that a lot of there have been a lot. There's a lot, whatever, as a the anecdotal algorithmic shit I have seen indicates that a number of people have taken this letter as like refusal to address the cliffhanger rather than being like, no, no, I got all the themes, but I was mad that she just gave us another cliffhanger. Um, but I think that she addresses that incredibly clearly when she says wars very often end, sad to say, just as ours did, with a nearly seamless transition to another war. I think if you take that approach to it, if you take the approach to that last bit that I so painstakingly described just before I started reading this, um, the ending where Jake finally kicks it back into gear because he's back in war, because that's all he knows how to do with his life on some level, because he was fucking 13 when he started doing it, and he was a general when he was 13 years old, and he like sort of half melds into civilian life like ish, but like sort of in a black ops sort of way, and then all of a sudden he's got another war to fight and he can like make decisions again. I think that's a very clear example of ways in which wars fuck people up into being fucked up by war such that they can only make sense of the world in that way. Um, I don't think that's a fucking cliffhanger. I think that's a and listen, I'm being impassioned here. And whenever I get impassioned, I like to give like to give people an out. Um, I loved the ending of the Dark Tower. Maybe we'll talk about it someday. Maybe we'll talk about it someday. Me and B. I love that ending. I think it's really really effective. So if you disagree with that, I can't imagine why you're still here because you're clearly not a B. Um, but I think that ending, and I can see how you wouldn't necessarily get there. It wouldn't get to the fact that this fucking horrifying monstrosity shows up that's never been telegraphed in any of the books prior. That is just brand new, big bad in a whole universe of even more powerful warlike potentials. Um, it feels like a cheap cop out or something like that. If you're reading it through the lens of sometimes war begets war, especially if you're reading it through the lens of this was fucking published right at the late 90s and 2001. This is a letter written probably right around the build up to the Iraq War. This is like directly responding to the material conditions on the ground. It's not that the letter is responding to them; it's that the books were always. Um, and and I think I think reading that letter and then reading the beginning is probably the best possible Animorphs experience. That's the tagline here. Read K. Applegate's letter that I just read to you, and then read the Animorphs number 54, the beginning. It's great. It's a great combo. Teach you a lot. It's pretty fun too. It's a pretty fun kids book about PTSD. I can't believe I've been going this long. I'm gonna go start my computer for another second. This is not the longest one. This is not the longest one. I don't know if that's true or not. Thanks for not watching.